Here's a approximately 1,500-word emotional biker story based on your title. If you want, I can also shorten it for YouTube narration or expand it further. Bikers laughed at the teenage girl's jacket, then noticed the patch that shut them up. The rumble of motorcycle engines echoed across the gravel parking lot of the Iron Horse Roadhouse, a bar that had been a gathering place for bikers for decades. Chrome gleamed under the late afternoon sun. Leather jackets creaked as riders leaned against their bikes, sharing beers, stories, and laughter. Inside the bar, the atmosphere was exactly the same. Loud, rough, unfiltered. A group of seasoned bikers sat around a large wooden table near the center of the room. Their jackets were heavy with patches, symbols of clubs, brotherhoods, road miles, and memories that only other bikers understood. They were in the middle of telling old road stories when the front door creaked open. Everyone glanced up for a moment. And then the laughter started. A teenage girl had just walked inside. She couldn't have been older than 16 or 17. Her boots were dusty, her jeans slightly worn, and hanging loosely over her shoulders was an oversized black leather biker jacket. It was clearly too big for her. The sleeves hung past her wrists. The shoulders drooped, and the back almost reached her knees. One of the bikers, a thick-bearded man named Rick, smirked and nudged his friend. "Well, look at that," he chuckled. "Did Halloween come early?" Another biker laughed loudly. "Kid probably bought that at a thrift store trying to look tough." The girl froze for a moment near the door. Their laughter filled the room. She lowered her eyes but didn't turn around. Instead, she slowly walked toward the counter and sat on a stool. The bartender, Maria, gave the men a warning glance. "Knock it off," she muttered under her breath. But Rick leaned back in his chair and called across the room. "Hey kid." The girl turned slightly. "You lost or something?" he said with a grin. Another biker chimed in. "That jacket's about 3 sizes too big." More laughter erupted. For a moment, it seemed like the girl might leave. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the counter. Then she took a breath. "I'm not lost," she said quietly. Her voice was calm, but it carried across the room. Rick raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah, then what are you doing here?" The girl hesitated. "Looking for someone who might have known my dad." The laughter faded slightly. Rick shrugged. "Lot of dads out there, kid." She slowly slid off the stool. Then she turned around fully. That's when they saw the back of the jacket. And the room went silent. The oversized leather wasn't empty. It was covered in patches. But not the kind you could buy online or at a tourist shop. These patches were old, worn, earned, road-faded. At the center of the back was a large patch that made several bikers immediately straighten in their chairs. It read, "Iron Wolves MC, founding member." And beneath it, a smaller patch with a name stitched in white thread. Jack, Ghost, Mercer. Rick's grin disappeared instantly. Across the room, another biker whispered under his breath. "No way." The girl noticed the sudden silence. She turned back slowly. "You knew him?" she asked. Rick stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Where did you get that jacket?" he asked carefully. The girl looked confused. "It was my dad's." A heavy quiet settled over the bar. Maria the bartender slowly placed a glass down on the counter. Rick walked closer. His voice was no longer mocking. "Kid, what did you say your name was?" "Emily. Emily Mercer." Rick stared at the jacket again. His eyes lingered on the name patch. Then he rubbed the back of his neck. "I'll be damned," he muttered. From another table, an older biker with gray hair stood up. His name was Hank, and when he spoke, his voice was softer than anyone had ever heard it. "Jack Mercer was your father?" Emily nodded. "Yes." Hank slowly approached. "You look like him," he said. Emily blinked in surprise. "You knew him?" Rick let out a quiet laugh. "Knew him?" He shook his head. "Kid, your dad practically built this place." Emily's eyes widened. "My dad never talked about biker clubs much." Hank smiled faintly. "That sounds like Jack." Rick gestured toward the jacket. "Mind if I take a closer look?" Emily hesitated but then turned around. Rick carefully studied the patches. The Iron Wolves emblem, the road captain badge, the old rally patches from decades ago. Then he noticed the small patch near the bottom. A black strip with silver thread. "Ride forever, fallen brother." Rick stepped back. His voice dropped. "We thought Ghost died 10 years ago." Emily nodded slowly. "He did." The room went quiet again. Hank removed his hat. "How?" he asked gently. Emily swallowed. "Cancer." A few bikers looked down at their tables. Rick leaned against a chair. "Jack never told us." Emily looked confused. "You knew him, but you didn't know he was sick." Hank shook his head. "Your dad disappeared off the road one day. We thought he just left the life. Emily looked at the jacket. He didn't want anyone to see him like that. Maria spoke softly from the counter. That sounds like a biker. Emily managed a small smile. He kept this jacket in the closet. He said it reminded him of family. Rick exhaled slowly. Family is exactly what it was. Emily reached into her pocket. I found something else too. She pulled out a folded photograph. Rick took it carefully. The picture was old, faded, but clear enough to see a group of younger bikers standing in front of the same bar. And right in the center, a tall man with dark hair and a calm smile. Jack, Ghost, Mercer. Rick let out a breath. Man, that was a long time ago. Hank chuckled quietly. Jack rode harder than anyone I ever met. Another biker spoke up. He once drove through a snowstorm just to bring medicine to a sick kid in the mountains. Rick nodded. That sounds about right. Emily listened carefully. My dad never told stories like that. Hank smiled. He wasn't the type to brag. Rick looked around the room. Boys, I think we owe this young lady an apology. Several bikers nodded immediately. Rick turned back to Emily. Sorry for laughing earlier. Emily shrugged slightly. It's okay. But Rick shook his head. No, it's not. He gestured toward the tables. Your dad was one of the best men any of us ever rode with. Hank placed a gentle hand on Emily's shoulder. And that jacket, he smiled. That jacket carries a lot of respect. Rick suddenly turned toward the bar. Maria, yes, bring out the house special. Maria's eyebrow lifted. The good one. Rick nodded. For Ghost. Maria smiled softly and reached under the counter. She placed a bottle and several glasses on the table. Rick filled them slowly. Then he handed one to Hank. And another to Emily. She hesitated. I'm underage. Rick laughed gently. Fair enough. He replaced her glass with a soda. Then he raised his own. To Jack, Ghost, Mercer. The entire room stood. Glasses lifted into the air. To Ghost. Emily felt tears sting her eyes. For years, she had only known her father as a quiet man who worked long hours and rarely spoke about his past. But here, in this room full of leather jackets and roaring bikes, she was finally seeing another side of him. A man who had been respected. Loyal. Brave. Hank looked at Emily. You know something? What? Your dad saved my life once. Emily's eyes widened. He did. Hank nodded. Bike crash in Colorado. Snowstorm. Coming. If Jack hadn't ridden 50 miles to get help. He paused. I wouldn't be standing here. Rick smiled. That's why we called him Ghost. Emily tilted her head. Why? Rick pointed toward the door. Because he always showed up when someone needed him. Hank added quietly. And then disappeared before anyone could thank him. Emily looked down at the oversized jacket sleeves. For the first time since arriving. She smiled proudly. Rick glanced around the room again. Hey boys. Several bikers looked up. Rick gestured toward the parking lot. What do you say we give Ghost's daughter a proper escort home? Grins spread across the room. Engines started outside moments later. Emily stepped out of the bar and froze. Nearly 20 motorcycles were lined up. Chrome gleaming. Engines rumbling like thunder. Rick handed her a helmet. Hop on. Emily blinked. Seriously. Hank laughed. Kid, when Ghost rides with us. He pointed at the bikes. We all ride. Emily climbed onto the back of Rick's motorcycle. As the convoy rolled out onto the highway, the roar of engines echoed across the open road. And for the first time since losing her father, Emily didn't feel alone anymore. Behind her, stitched into worn leather, the patch caught the fading sunlight. Jack, Ghost, Mercer. Still riding, still respected, still remembered. If you want, I can also create a stronger viral YouTube hook plus thumbnail idea. Part 2 of the story. A 60-second TikTok Shorts version .1500 WAD.